Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Work Matters. Today's special episode is brought to you by Bible Church in
Aren't they all?
Español. It
Aren't they
just
all?
makes Bible Church in Español.
I didn't catch that part. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go, man. It's kind of small. And Work Matters is a monthly podcast of our church where we get to better know a member of our congregation and hear about their upbringing, hear their story, hear their faith journey, and also about the work that they do and how the Lord has called them to do that work. And we do tend to focus on the marketplace, but this month I've invited the one, the only Malcolm Pettigrew to come and to join us. As many of you know, Malcolm is preparing to launch a church in Hillsborough later this year. We're recording this in March, and you're launching in August, September.
Yeah, we'll do a soft launch in August so we can kind of get the kinks out for about a month, and then officially launching in September.
Fantastic. Yeah, and we'll get into the details of that. So Malcolm, thanks, brother, for making time to be here to talk with us.
Yeah, so glad to be here, man.
Yeah. So my first recollection of you is I remember back in 2011, you were interviewing. I was the youth pastor at the time. I was getting ready to transition out of that role to go to Germany. And I was a consultant to the team. I was not actually on the search team that hired you, but I remember being asked to pick you up at the airport. And so I did. And I think I remember by the time we'd made it to the meeting where I dropped you off, I think I remember thinking, okay, I think this is our guy.
Yeah.
So
that's a good sign.
Yeah. So I'm glad it worked out, man.
Yeah. Here we are 9 years later. Wait,
here we are.
10 or 11 years later.
That's right. Yeah. So Malcolm, tell us a little bit, obviously most people here at our church probably know who you are, but tell us where did you grow up? What was your childhood like? And tell us how you ended up landing here at the Bible Church.
Okay. So I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio. And, my faith, I've had like major phases where I felt like almost embarrassed about my story because I grew up in a Christian home. My parents are faithful believers, and I came to faith really young, like before even going to grade school. And so when you grow up in a church setting, at least in the 90s when I was growing up, there were a lot of really dramatic stories told at youth groups and church events that I thought were super cool. And I thought my story is just not really very worth telling because, I was like 4 when I came to faith. There were definitely some turning from sin issues, but it wasn't very dramatic or worth storytelling about.
You weren't into the party scene yet,
right? I wasn't into the party scene. Yeah. And yeah, I think an immaturity and naivete definitely made me feel like my story is dumb and I don't really like sharing it. But looking back on it now, from my perspective as a parent, especially, I'm like, that's exactly what I'm praying for my children. Mm-hmm. And it's such a blessing to see the way that the Lord protected me from things and prepared me for the path and the life that I believe he's called me to. So I grew up in Cincinnati. It's an awesome town. Most people consider Ohio a flyover state. Like by definition, it's a flyover state, but it's beautiful. And I loved growing up there. My whole family's still there. I went to the University of Kentucky. And so for those of you who are geographically challenged, that's a bordering state with Ohio. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but my wife learned that when we got married. So,
we don't edit these videos, right?
Oh, well, maybe you should do this one.
Yeah.
So yeah, UK, which makes me an enemy of everybody around here, especially this time of year in March. But my team did not do very well this year. And then kind of a circuitous path to land here in North Carolina. I was working full time for a summer camp in Texas, a Christian camp. That's where Kelly and I met, and we got pregnant about 6 months after getting married, which just totally sped up the process for us. So very much the Lord has consistently used circumstances and logistical kind of things to lead and move us. And so we Kelly really wanted to stay home. I wanted to be able to support her in that. And the job I had there really was not designed to support a family, time-wise primarily. So CHBC was the first among about 7 different churches that I applied for youth ministry positions to. And this is where we landed. We moved here when my oldest, Noah, was only like 6 months old, 7 months old. And we've been here for the last 10 years, added 3 other kids to the mix in the process. And it's been a real blessing to learn in ministry here, grow in ministry here, and now to be starting a new church just down the road in Hillsborough.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And the camp that you worked in, you've led leadership trips with our youth group.
That's right.
In partnership with the camp, right?
That's right. Yeah. So some people are not aware. I actually was a forestry major for almost 3 years before switching to psychology. I learned that I like people more than trees. And that camp was a big part of that. I love the outdoors. I like being outside a ton. And so while I was youth minister, I took every other year a group of kind of upper class leadership students, upperclassmen, back to the Colorado location of that camp for backpacking trip, which was super fun. A great way to bring a team together is to take them outside out of their comfort zone and make them do things they aren't used to doing.
Yeah, Gabe and I were recently on a hike, and we were referencing that trip that he got to go on.
Really special.
He had a lot of fun. Thanks for putting that together.
Oh yeah.
So you came here, youth minister, and then what happened? How did you start sensing a desire or longing to start a church?
Yeah, and well, I mentioned a minute ago that I feel the Lord has used circumstances so much in our lives, and I've prayed a lot that He would be giving me a burning bush kind of thing. So far, that hasn't happened. I believe that the Spirit absolutely still acts that way, but it hasn't been for me. And so after a few years of youth ministry, I felt very much like I knew I wanted to work full-time in the church for a career. So we started to pursue seminary, and again, a very circuitous path there. It took me about 7 years, what sometimes takes people 3, to finish a seminary degree. I graduated from Western Seminary, which is all the way out in Portland, Oregon. And I think in that process and getting to lead the youth group and that team for years at a time then, about 3 years ago, as we were looking towards the end of this degree, and I had been the youth minister for maybe around 6 years at that point, I very much felt like this is something I wanted to consider and pursue. You and I started talking about that. What would it be like to start a new church somewhere, anywhere? I don't even know where. But I started to feel like it was something I was interested in and wanted to do. Very, very quickly, Kelly told me that's not what she wanted to do. The famous quote is that she said, "That's cool, you can do that, but you're going to have to do that with your next wife," you know? So she was not excited about doing that. And really, some mentors of ours told us that we needed to stop talking about it because it was kind of an impasse, and just take some specific time to pray about it and ask the Lord for unity in particular. And that was a really special and, I don't know, very, very special moment for us to look back on and hold on to, because we did that. And when we came back together, I was very much praying, Lord, if this is not what you want for us to do, then I don't want to strong arm this. But came back together, and I was saying, this is still something I feel like the Lord's leading us to. And Kelly said the same. I feel like the same is true for me. And both of us, we hadn't talked about this yet, but we're excited from that process to think about planting in a town that was maybe a little smaller than Durham and Chapel Hill, where we've been living, and a little more rural, which was very exciting for us to hold on to that and look back at that. So we identified a handful of different places that we wanted to go look at. And we're planning to use the sabbatical that we got to do a couple of years ago. Do that. We got to stay in Hillsborough. And another really special moment there is that at the end of that week, I remember Kelly saying, do we really need to go visit all of these other places? This feels very much like where we want to be, where the Lord wants us to be. Our kids were, as much as they could be, engaged in that process at that point. And as the Lord would have it, the pandemic shut down the rest of our plans. So we did not get to go to all the other places we were looking at, but it felt really special to be able to say, this is something we decided on even before all that was taken away for us. So that was a really cool moment. And for lots of practical reasons. So number one, we love Hillsborough. It's a place we've been for the last 9 years, spending a ton of time enjoying the geography here. We love to play at the Eno and go fish at Okinichi Mountain and spend time downtown and eat food there. It's a place that we just liked a ton and spent a lot of time already. And then on top of that, there's a lot of practical realities that make a lot of sense. We're not that far from CHBC as our primary sending organization. There's a lot of practical help that comes from that. There's kind of a critical mass of people who are already in and around the Hillsborough area who have agreed to commit and come start this church with us. And not to mention that there's the need. I think it's really easy. It's an easy sell for a lot of church planters to make some sort of comment like Hillsborough needs a gospel preaching church because there aren't any there, which isn't really true. I mean, there are definitely some faithful churches here, but I don't want to belittle that work by talking about why Hillsborough needs the church we're starting, because the reality is there's thousands of people here who don't know the Lord. I think for those of you who don't know, Hillsborough is a weird small town in North Carolina. It's got the rural kind of side of things, but for small towns in North Carolina that are less than 10,000 people, it's usually very rural and very conservative. And that's not Hillsborough. There's a lot of different philosophies and cultures and beliefs that are present together, but that are not a melting pot. And so at the end of the day, like I said before, there are about, according to census data, more than half of the population of Hillsborough doesn't even consider themselves religious at all. So I think that it's true. There are a lot of people who don't even know that they need the Lord. Life is pretty good. They're affluent. They've got most of what they want, and they aren't even aware of how desperately they need the gospel. So I believe that we actually need more. We need more churches here to do this work. The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few.
Yeah.
I'm kind of rabbit trailing a little bit. I don't
great.
know if I'm answering the question at this point.
No, that's good. That's part of the story of the calling, how the Lord has led you and opened the doors. And man, I remember the pandemic hitting and the way it impacted your plans. And it's cool to see that now retrospectively, you guys see that actually as part of God's grace.
Yeah.
That you got to spend time in the one place where you really feel you're being called to go to.
Absolutely.
That's pretty sweet. Okay. So then you began this transition, and we transitioned you out of the youth minister role into church planting resident. And you've been doing a residency training through an organization based out of Raleigh. Tell us a little bit more about that. Tell us about what that organization is, what it does, and maybe just bring us into an event and give us a glimpse of what it's like being a resident through them.
Yeah. So that's called the Leaders Collective. I think you just mentioned that. And there are dozens of really great church planting preparation groups out there. There's several in this state also. What I love about the Leaders Collective is their focus. And so I think it's true that church planting is very much starting a business. You have to establish yourself as a business with the state, articles of incorporation. If you want to be a nonprofit, then you have to go through the whole 501c3 process and constitution and bylaws and yada, 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 all that kind of stuff. So there's a basic reality to that. And it does require a lot of just practical work. So there are plenty of really great programs out there that prepare leaders of churches really well to do that stuff smoothly and efficiently and to see their vision come to life. I felt like through CHBC, through some of the members of our team who are coming with us, that especially even where those are not my wheelhouse kind of things. We have people who can help walk through that stuff in really healthy ways. So what I wanted out of a preparation cohort like this was primarily for my own preparation, that I would be a healthy pastor, that I'd be a healthy husband, that I'd be kind of brought up to speed on more of that soft skills kind of stuff that, frankly, a lot of programs don't focus a ton on. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, is the real strength of the Leaders Collective. They're built on a Lilly Foundation, like, decade-long study. I forget how long it was, but they did this giant study with all kinds of religious organizations and different denominations of Christians and different religions as well, to find out what is it that makes spiritual leaders succeed and fail. And across the board, so across religions, across denominations, across all kinds of different perspectives, by far and away, the top thing was pastors and religious leaders need friends. So we need community, and millions and millions of dollars were spent to establish this fact with, data. But hopefully that's not a surprise to people, that people need relationship. And sadly, maybe it's not a surprise, but I think for some people it might be. I think leadership positions like that, it's very easy to get yourself into a very lonely place where you don't have people that you can confide in and that you can treat as a peer. So one of the primary functions and goals of this group, they keep them small to 6 or 7 people. So my cohort is 7 people, including myself, with the intention that that group can become, hopefully, a group of guys that I can lean on and keep relationship with for the long haul, for the rest of my career and my life, hopefully. So that is a primary piece of it that I don't think I can oversell because of how great it's been already after months of meeting with them. And then what we do, we meet once a month in a different location across the Southeast. All of those churches, all those church planters are spread out, and some of them are in Texas, Tennessee, right outside of Washington, D.C., South Carolina, Georgia, for example. So we're coming from all over the place, different denominational backgrounds, which I find really helpful as well. But we get together, and for example, this last meeting we had in Cincinnati, which was cool for me to get to see some of my family along with that trip. But it was all about mission and vision and values kind of stuff. So we do go through a lot of that hard skills kind of stuff that's practical and helpful, but in the context of how are you going to lead this well and in a healthy way as a pastor of the community and of the family that you have. So for me, the analogy I like to use is there are lots of good training programs out there which prepare people well. I just feel like I get to train with Yoda as opposed to some other random, Jedi along the way. It's just kind of a silly analogy it felt really true to me. I feel like one of my favorite things in this whole process has been this cohort. It's been a really huge blessing.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, Malcolm, here you talking about that is reminding me of I'm working through a few books right now. I don't know how you are, but I'm never reading only one book. Like I read several chapters and then I grab, oh, this looks good, and I start, and then I'm like, oh, I got to go back and finish that. So this is a reminder to myself to go finish those books. But 2 of those books I'm going through right now that are really interesting, and things you mentioned made me think of it. And just to encourage you in this really good word about community. One of the books is The Flourishing Pastor by Tom Nelson. And he talks about how you have, pastors tend to kind of fall into different camps of how they operate. And one of them is the Lone Ranger camp, right? And just how destructive that is when you don't have friends, when you don't have people who know you, and you kind of separate yourself and you don't allow people into your life. And then the other book
where it's like a Lone Ranger is romantic, but a Lone Ranger is a dead ranger.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the other book is by Paul David Tripp, and it's called Lead. And in that book, he talks a lot about the necessity of healthy leadership being formed and forged in community.
Absolutely.
And one of the lines in there that, and I'm probably butchering it, but it's something to the extent of like, spiritual formation is a community project, and just thinking about that, I was like, man, I cannot grow. I cannot really become more Christ-like on my own, because
Right.
we weren't designed to be shaped that way as individuals, right? But as part of a community. So I'm just really encouraged, man, to hear that that's been a focus of the program and that you're really leaning into that.
Yeah, it's been, these are not, I mean, it's all truth is God's truth. And these are realities from him, like the picture in the New Testament is we are a body and we can't serve. So like, you don't cut your hand off and expect it to survive on its own. We need each other. So it's kind of cool to see how simple those things are, yet how profound it is and how much it really plays into everything.
Yeah. All right. So with the, next few minutes that we have here, can you give us just kind of snapshot of what the process has been like for you? So you started this residency, I think it was back in August or September.
Right. August was our first meeting.
Yeah. Can you give us just a flyover, not only of, not necessarily details about the program, but like, what does your work look like?
Mm-hmm.
What's that over the last 9 months in preparation, including forming the launch team, those meetings and your hopes for August and beyond.
Perfect. Okay. So starting in August, we've been meeting once a month with that cohort to go over everything that they're leading us throughout the year. And that'll continue through this coming summer. I think our last meeting is in August of this coming summer, 22. And I do hope that will continue on with that group of guys going forward too. But right alongside that are dozens of other things. I used to joke that, not joke, it was just true. I never felt like I had the same day twice in youth ministry, because teenagers have different things going on all the time.
Because teenagers.
Yeah, because teenagers, period. So, and I feel even more intensely like there's not a single day that has been the same since August 1st, because you have to throw on these different hats all the time. There are a lot of practical, logistical things to work through, like establishing ourselves as a business with the state, as I mentioned before, working through creating a budget from the ground up, deciding what our governance and polity is going to look like, in the midst of watching CHBC work through some of the same things.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of logistical background stuff that the approaching deadline that we've set for ourselves of August and September has started to, as it from August on, there's things that have to happen in order to take the next step. So that's sort of all happening in the background. And then I mentioned before, I would say that those things are not necessarily my wheelhouse. Those have to happen, but it's the work part of it for me. The part that I've loved and that encourages me that this is encouraging is meeting with people. I would say half or even a little more of my time has been given to connecting with people. And that includes primarily members of the planting team. We've been calling it that. Everybody who's committed to starting the church with us is we call the planting team. And that is literally dozens of conversations from summer and onward, talking to people who, hey, I heard about this thing you guys are starting in Hillsborough. I just want to hear more about that. And sometimes those folks just want to support what we're doing. And sometimes they're like, I want to think about potentially joining with what you're doing. And then obviously that planting team, we want to continue to connect and get together. So we've been meeting once a month with that team as well at the end of each month to talk about and think about formation. What is it that we're going to be? What is the church we're going to be like? What I mentioned mission, vision, values kind of stuff. We need to give ourselves language and figure out who we're going to be as a church. There's some very basic realities that are true of every church, or we're not a church, but practically we're here in Hillsborough and I am the leader. All of you are here. We're going to look a specific way because of the people that God's bringing to us as a church. That's been super cool. And then I'm also trying to get together that group a couple of times a month is the aim, for just fun and fellowship kinds of things, to spend time together and get to know each other. That group is probably the predominant chunk of time in terms of people. And then there's also, we're trying to figure out where we're going to meet, for example, and that requires a lot of meeting and touching base with different churches that we might get to meet in their building when they're not worshiping on a Sunday. Different organizations are possibilities as well. But my goal, like with that, for example, is not just to sign a lease and get to use a space at a specific time on a Sunday. But I want for that to be a relationship. And so often that is a handful of meetings before we even get to the gritty details of what a lease agreement would be, for example. So I would say the majority of my time has been spent connecting with people and sharing the vision of what we're doing and shaping that, forming it together. And then on top of that, the background of all of the necessary things that have to happen logistically to practically start a church here in Hillsborough.
That's awesome, man. 3 quick fire questions for you.
Yeah.
Your favorite restaurant in Hillsborough?
I said this to you the other day. I think my favorite restaurant, I don't know how to say it.
Yeah, that's I'm kind of putting you on the spot.
Ixtapa, Ixtapa. I don't know. I'm probably butchering that. I need to go there and ask one of the people that works there. How are you supposed to say the name of this restaurant? It's an awesome little Hispanic restaurant right there where downtown starts. If you're coming into town on Old 86, turns into Churton Street, and like right as you're crossing the Eno River before Weaver Street, for people who are aware of where I'm talking about, there's a little restaurant tucked right there, mostly outside seating, but really good food. I like it a lot.
It's Ixtapa, right?
Right. Yeah.
All right. Question number 2. Favorite coffee shop?
The only one, Cup of Joe.
Makes it easy, huh?
Yeah. I'm trying to convince, not for competition's sake, but just, more hours and more coffee. I'm trying to convince anybody on our planting team to think about starting a new business, a coffee business.
Hey, a little business mission action.
Right. Because there's only one right now. Cup of Joe's it.
That's exciting. All right. And final question, if somebody wants to learn more about what you're doing and, wants to get some time with you to learn, to encourage, to pray, whatever, what should they do?
Well, I think my first choice would be to hang out with you and catch up with you. Come buy you some food here in Hillsborough. We can go to Ixtapa.
And then Cup of Joe.
Or Cup of Joe or something. Connect with me. One of the members of the planting team would be great. I would love to do more of these meetings I'm talking about. You can always reach out to me via email. Malcolm, Malcolm. That second L sometimes throws people off. Malcolm@BibleChurch.org is still my email address. I mentioned that it's part of the decision for landing in Hillsborough was how practical it is to stay connected to and rely on CHBC as we start these first year or two. And so until we are able to kind of launch our own presence online and deal with a lot of those kinds of things, we're very much still connected to CHBC. Like I still have a BibleChurch.org email address. So Malcolm@BibleChurch.org is one of the easiest ways to connect to me.
And then we will also add a link in the description to that, and also to the website that you have with updates and all that.
Perfect.
Cool, man. Well, Malcolm, thanks for your time, brother. Look forward to grabbing a bite at Ixtapa, or however you say it, and maybe a Cup of Joe.
Yes.
And seriously, if you're listening to this and want to be a part of what Malcolm and others are doing and what the Lord is doing in Hillsborough, please do connect with him. And maybe the Lord would even inspire you to go and start another coffee shop and have a gospel focus on that. That would be really fantastic. I would love to join you in conversation with that. That would be a lot of fun.
Amen.
Malcolm, God bless you, brother. We appreciate you. Excited to see what the Lord is going to do.
I appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about what we're doing, man. I really do.
All right, brother. Bless you.
Have a good day.